During the Second World War, a whole heap of defensive measures were set up in Moreton Bay. Now, Bribie Island had Fort Bribie in the north, it had the skirmish battery in the south, there was Fort Cowan, which was on Moreton Island. There was also a whole heap of controlled minefields out in that area. But after some re-evaluation, we realised, oh shit, there's a massive hole in our defences. Let me show you where it was. The defensive hole was none other than the Rouse Channel. The Royal Australian Navy realised that it was actually quite vulnerable to attacks from midget submarines and fast-moving torpedo boats. Also, this part of the island could be taken by an invading force, and our enemies could attack ships in this area with impunity. To counter this, the Rouse Battery, or Fort Rouse as it's also known, was built in 1943. Also, the Navy started building a submarine net through here as well. But there was a problem, and in fact, there were several. First and foremost, the battery was armed with two 155mm M1917 guns, which was slow as buggery, only firing 4 rounds per minute. So against a fleet of fast-moving torpedo boats, they'd be pretty well useless. It's very unlikely they'd get a direct hit. Also, there was no detection equipment on that side of the island, so there was no way of finding anything trying to sneak through that area anyway. Furthermore, they couldn't stick mines in there, remotely operated or otherwise, because if they were dislodged by the tidal rays, then they'd be a hazard for shipping. Oh, and lastly, that submarine net took bloody ages to build. In fact, they were still building it when the war ended. So to combat this, they created the thing that's behind me. Now, this place was the last defences for Brisbane. If this place failed to work, we were absolutely screwed. Let me show you its features. The place that I'm talking about is Royal Australian Navy Station number 9. Now there were there were 10 of them, but they all deserve their own videos, and I might do them in the future. And see, the thing is behind me, I'll just grab my torch. The thing behind me, this is the generator station. And unfortunately you can't go into it because idiots have vandalised it, and they didn't want it to be vandalised inside. But look at that hinge, and I don't know, it's just really, I wish I had brought a big torch, talking of idiots. Anyway, so if you can see, there would have been a generator in there and some other kind of generator in there, but golly, it would be really hot. It'd be really, really warm. I'm glad it wasn't my job. But yeah, remember I was talking about vandals? Idiots have been vandalising it, smashing holes in it and doing dumb shit like that, painting things on it. And unfortunately, guys, that's why we can't go into it, because of idiots who have destroyed it for everyone. Yeah, so this one here, I'll point my camera through and we'll see. So, yeah, there's would have been a big generator in here. And then there was the output over there, and it's still got the wood on it and everything. It's quite an amazing place. It's actually quite well preserved. Yeah, so you come over here, you see this wee cable here, and it runs down to here, and this is the star of our show, realistically. Oh, it's raining. This was the indicator loop and PE beam. So the indicator loop worked by, it ran these cables out into the river, and anything that was trying to get through, like submarines, anything submerged, or even actually ships, anything that was metal that passed over it would give off an electronic, like a signal that it was there. It would pick up the magnetism of the craft. Interesting thing about submarines of this era, that they were all magnetic. They all, well, I suppose it's not really surprising, no matter of metal, but yeah, because of that magnetism that they give off, they'd be picked up by this. Now, what's quite interesting about this, this technology was basic as basic, and yet it was still highly classified until about, I think, 1975 or something ridiculous like that. It's quite remarkable. Anyway, so it also had a PE beam, which actually I think is even cooler. So the PE beam was a bit like, you know when you go to Woolies or Coles or something, and there's the, you walk in front of the door and it opens up automatically because it senses that you're there, it breaks a circuit, and when you walk in front of the door. Well, it was similar to that, except it didn't open a door, it shut a door downstream. I'll explain that further. Yeah, so anyway, this is an artificer's hut. This is where, oh, look at the door, it's still got hinges and everything. That's pretty cool. Must have been some kind of, anyway. So this was the artificer's hut, and this is where like engineers worked and, you know, technicians, whatever they do. Have you tried turning it off or nothing? Anyway, in there was the indicator loops, and in here was the PE beam. So yeah, like I said, very similar to like on a door in a shop. So they shot a beam across to Fisherman's Island. Now anything that was entering the river, so like surface craft, anything that broke that circuit, anything that went in front of it would send a signal here that something had crossed it, and then they'd send that message downstream. If you go around and look at it, like there are heaps of concrete bases on the ground. I sort of wonder what was actually housed on top of them, and what was the building. I'll show you what's here. Now, if we go over here to the indicator loop, let me show you what's actually in it. Poke the camera through. You see, it's quite intriguing, really. See if you can. Still got wood on the arm. There's still nails and everything. Actually, that's really kind of cool. It's really intriguing. So, if you see through there, that's the artificer's room in there, through past, and this room in here, this one here, it's still got like the wooden beams and everything. That's really cool. Anyway, it's this was where the indicator loops were, in this wee room. It still would have been hot as buggery. I'm glad it wasn't my job. And then if you go over here, now this place was actually quite huge. When you walk around it, you see like slabs on the ground where things were. It had all these different huts for different officers. They all had their own house. I suppose they would have been accessing kind of classified information they didn't really want people to know about. And then there was the lowest ranks. They ate by themselves, and they ate with themselves rather, and the officers were served in their homes. And it's really kind of an interesting place, but there isn't really much left of it. I've got a couple of pictures of this place which I'll show you in a minute, but really it's a difficult place to learn anything about. There isn't very much information in the way of pictures of what the actual buildings were besides those two. Yeah, so there's this thing, and yeah, there's not really much else here. But it's actually a really fascinating place. Actually, interesting thing is, when in this heyday, it actually had its own billiards room and shop. Like, yeah, it was huge. Anyway, let's look at those photos. Sadly, the transmitter hut on Fisherman's Island was demolished in the 1970s, so it's no longer there, which I think is a real shame. The only pictures I could find of this place come from a book called Fortress Brisbane, which can be bought at Fort Lytton. If you look at this picture, it appears to have a brick footing on one side, so I suspect it might be the raised brick structure we looked at earlier. Here's a much clearer picture of what that indicator and PE beam setup looked like. So I suppose that concrete slab that I was talking about earlier was probably this. If you want to find this place yourself, it can be found in Google Maps under RAN station number 9 Pinkenba. If you've learned something new, please like and subscribe and press the bell notification. Cheers, thanks.